Brian Becker is the director of ANSWER, an anti-war and social justice coalition. He's also written and co-authored several books on U.S. foreign policy. So let's start there, Brian. This year also marks 100 years of U.S. relations with Poland. How good or bad are they now?
Well, relations between the United States and Poland are at an all-time high. Poland was a member of the Warsaw Pact. It was an ally of the Soviet Union and thus Russia since the late 1990s. It's been a member of NATO. Today, there are 5,000 U.S. troops, not permanently stationed in Poland, but kind of virtually permanently stationed there. They're always on rotation. And the Polish government is going out of its way to cement relations with the United States. Just in June, the president came and met with Donald Trump. He said, let's build Fort Trump in Poland. Meaning that the U.S. would establish a military base, which of course would fly in the face of a 1997 treaty, but nonetheless, that's where the Polish government is going. It's looking to Washington rather than to the EU.
Well, I was going to ask you how you would compare it to relations with Brussels, and also, is it something about what some would call perhaps the Donald Trump effect?
Well, I think Poland has its own dynamic. Before Donald Trump came to office, Obama was doing pretty much the same thing with the Polish government. The Polish internal political scene is also playing out inside the EU because, of course, the current president, Duda's rival, Donald Tusk, is the president of the European Council. Those political figures have their own differences. But even before Donald Trump, what we see happening is a Polish-American axis. What the United States government is doing under Trump is intensifying pressure on the Polish government to sever any kind of relationship with other major powers so that, in a way, Poland would function as an extension of American power.
Polish defense minister, we understand, objected to a German delegation being invited to the ceremony there in Warsaw on Sunday. Your thoughts?
Well, in one way, very understandable. I mean, here's the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Millions of Poles died because of the Nazi occupation. It's quite something that the German delegation comes, the country that represented the fascist threat to Poland, and yet you have Vladimir Putin and Russia, the country that actually liberated Poland from the Nazis, being not invited. The contradictions there could not be more stark. How can you remember the 80th anniversary of the end of the fascist domination over Poland and exclude those who actually helped liberate the country?
So 10 years ago, Vladimir Putin was invited. At the time they met in Gdansk. It wasn't easy. There were tensions between Poland and Russia, largely because of a media campaign at the time. This time he wasn't invited, and Poland says it's because of Crimea. I'm guessing that you think excluding them is bad in the overall picture as well.
Well, it's a historical fabrication. I mean, it's kind of myth-making about the end of World War II. World War II ended because hundreds of thousands of Soviet Red Army soldiers liberated Poland and Bulgaria, Romania, the eastern and central parts of Europe. Of course, there was the Allied invasion from the West, but the greatest part of the burden was borne by the Soviet soldiers and the Soviet citizenry. So it's not right from a historical point of view. Also, this is kowtowing, I would say, on the part of the Polish government to the Pentagon's new military doctrine that targets China and Russia for major power conflict. Again, playing sort of politics with an important anniversary.
Is it at all kowtowing to domestic politics, to perhaps elements within Poland's politics that don't want to see the Russians there?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's a strong anti-Russian sentiment inside of Poland, but Polish opinion is very mixed. 50%, the majority actually don't want to have U.S. military installations in Poland. There are communists, there are social democrats, there are Christian Democrats. There's a whole range of political opinion inside of Poland. It's very mixed, as we all know. But yeah, there's a strong anti-Russian strain, certainly.
How has Poland's political right, do you think, contributed to Warsaw's efforts, if you will, to rewrite its role, or at least how it's seen in its role in history? Last year, for example, we saw the controversial Holocaust law that was condemned here in Washington and also, of course, by Israel. Are we seeing more and more of that, at least Poland trying to clean up its image abroad, right or wrong?
Well, I think what we see is resurgent Polish nationalism. And resurgent Polish nationalism could be anti-Russian on one hand. On the other hand, there has been, and we can't deny this, a strong strain of anti-Semitism that was part and parcel of Polish nationalism. in the past. Certainly, the Nazis were the ones who set up the death camps. They weren't Polish death camps, as President Obama mistakenly stated. But nonetheless, there was an element of Polish society, very right-wing, very nationalistic, very anti-Semitic, that was real.
Author Brian Becker, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.